All right, so I am Jessica Kellerman. You're going to see my face on a couple slides from now. We just wanted to be upfront with the fact that this session is being recorded to accommodate so many of you today in person, but then also to make it available thereafter. So as such, there's limited interaction to maintain that bandwidth. So you will not be able to see us face to face on the screen. And when Rebecca and I have done this presentation before with DPI, we actually had the benefit of having people in front of us to complete the actual activities that we share. So lots of excitement in the room that we won't have today, but we definitely trust that behind those closed screens, you guys are trying to move yourselves around and imitate these activities that we share. And we also want to make sure that we encourage you to post questions and to contact us and reach out if you have any other ideas or some questions related to the slides. Next slide. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to do a quick overview of exercise in the brain, because in order to truly, own the thinking that we're trying to put out and say, hey, let me encourage physical activity in my students, you kind of need to experience that yourself. So we want to give a quick overview. Then we're going to have you get up and move throughout the presentation. Most of the activities are math and ELA related, and they are most likely concentrated among elementary, since that's where Rebecca and I have had most of our teaching experience. But having said that, in the course of presenting this, no matter what your grade level, you'll probably instantly come up with ways that you can adapt for your curriculum or for your grade and content area. So please be eager to share how you would adapt different abilities subjects. And we are still going to stick with some door prizes. So at the end, we're going to spin a wheel of names, and a lucky winner is going to get a whole set of these materials to use in their classrooms, and we'll get your contact information and send that to you through USPS. All right, next slide.
I'm sorry, I cannot interrupt for a second. I'm going to have to go back to get controls because we're not getting our captioning to come through, and that's critical that we do that. So I need to fix that and make sure that I provide that captioning link. So do you mind introducing yourselves while I'm doing that?
Oh, no, that's great. So I am Jessica Kellerman. I graduated from Chapel Hill back in 2006 and stumbled into teaching through lateral entry. That was not what I studied, but I actually fell in love with the classroom, ended up getting my master's from Pembroke in reading education, and stayed in the field for 13 years in a range of classrooms. So most of them were in inclusion and co-taught classrooms in the gen ed setting. And then I ended up turning to self-contained, which was a multi-grade, multi-categorical classroom. At the end of that, I was able to do a Fulbright to Botswana, which is in South Africa. Absolutely love working with teachers out there. So at that point, I came back and took a role in Moore County, working more directly with teachers. So that's what I do now. And we'll make sure that we share information related to Fulbright, information related to all those activities in this presentation as well. Rebecca?
So my name is Rebecca Adler. I currently work at in Cumberland County Schools, and I am that rare regular education teacher that comes to these EC conferences and these professional developments. Through my work with Miss Kellerman, we actually co-taught together in 5th grade. I graduated from Elmira College in 2016 with a bachelor's in elementary education, and I actually just graduated this summer from UNCP with my master's in education. Unfortunately, obviously, it's 2020, so I wasn't able to actually have my graduation, but I did complete that this summer. I've been teaching in North Carolina for 5 years now. This is my 5th year. I also worked in the public schools in New York, upstate New York, where I went to college as a long-term substitute while I was getting my degree. So I pretty much moved right to North Carolina, and this is where I've been teaching for my career since I've started. I currently teach math and science. This year is the first year I actually do not have an EC cluster, but I have all 4 years prior to this year. I really love taking those abstract math concepts and making them real world, hands-on, with my kids through both physical activity and just other different real life scenarios. And then that picture that you guys should hopefully all be able to see now is a picture of me with, oh no, now I'm blanking. With the teacher from Ellen DeGeneres, that was a North Carolina teacher who actually now teaches 4th grade at the Ron Clark Academy. Back in 2018, I had the amazing privilege to go to the Ron Clark Academy and learn from Ron Clark himself and all of the educators there at that school. It was so amazing, and I've definitely taken a lot of the things I learned there, especially when it comes to, physical activity and trying things outside the box, and have brought it to my own classroom.
And that was the one opportunity she forgot to invite her co-teacher to. Shame. But like Rebecca said, we have definitely co-taught and absolutely loved the experience. You'd have never known that she was only 5 years into teaching at that point. But truly loved it and super excited that she's still in the classroom right now. So we are going to start talking about the brain. All right, so these are the 4 basic parts of the brain. So there's 4 lobes. The frontal deals a lot with the emotional control center. So that's where you're planning, you're thinking, you're problem solving, a lot of your working memory. So your ability to remember steps to, say, a division problem while you're working and completing those steps is in the frontal lobe. You get your personality again from there, your sense of self. The temporal lobe interprets sound and language. So there's lots of sound and music, some facial recognition going on there, and some short-term visual and verbal memory. You've got your occipital, which is also dealing with visual processing, and your parietal lobe, which is processing sensory information, so orientation and calculations. So this is a quick video. If we can get it to play successfully, it's just under 5 minutes, and it's going to give you kind of a visual representation that'll help you yourself understand the way the brain is formed and how it functions together, and also potentially how you could explain this to your students.
Can you also put the link for the video in the chat for people that want to run it on their own machines in case they're having connectivity issues?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
So I think we're waiting on audio here, but I'll just try to narrate that as best as I can remember. So he's given the example of how the outside of your hand is somewhat darker as opposed to the inside when you turn your palm open. So that helps you to remember the gray matter versus the outside of your brain. Lori, do you want to keep playing it and I can just narrate it, or we can have them look at the link later?
Yeah, I was going to keep playing it, but I'm having trouble. Yeah, I'm not able to get the sound to come through with some of the other things that we have to do. So is the chat, the link is in the chat, and I'm sorry the volume is not working. I can't troubleshoot it while I'm showing it to you, so I apologize.
That's perfectly fine. So you guys have the link. If you can't see it in the chat box right now, it is embedded into this slide on the presentation. So make sure you check that out. It's worth the time. It's less than 5 minutes and it does a lot of movement. So whether you're a young learner or seasoned, it's super easy to help you remember the parts of the brain and how they function together. Okay, next slide.
Is this the slide you wanted?
We'll just go to the next slide since the video isn't working.
You're still sharing the video, not the slides.
Perfect. There we go. Awesome. So after the video, this slide would actually make a lot more sense. So be sure you go back to see that. There are 3 different ways that the brain can move together. And so you'll remember that when you see the video and see how you can cross your arms to stress the importance of crossing the midline. So your brain can move back and forth, such as when you're walking. Go side to side if you think about when you were a child, rolling down the hill. And up and down, such as when we're jumping. And in this slide, when you go back to that, there are a number of links that embed some material that's actually child-friendly. So if you have students, that's a great way to try to help them. There's some different activities as well as some reading that they can complete to help them understand the brain at their level. The next slide is going to stress the importance of exercise and the brain benefits. So your brain, when you exercise, you're building those memory muscles within your brain. It's also a natural Ritalin and Zoloft. So as far as calming your kids down and also getting them kind of pumped up to a place where they can take ownership of their learning and absorb everything in their surroundings. It's a super effective tool for regulating behavior. So that's why a lot of our classrooms that have some of those hyperactive students in there, they truly do want to incorporate some movement activities so they can regulate behavior within the classroom. And the benefits truly do span a long stretch of time. So if you take that little bit of chunk of time in your day to incorporate physical activity, you're going to see lasting benefits for hours. Sleep is super important to keeping that brain functioning. So definitely stress that to yourself. I know that's hard for us as teachers because we're constantly, checking email and talking to parents well past the school day is ending. But stress that to yourself and then also to your students because the brain needs 7 to 9 hours. And that's just for an adult, so much more for a student. And that's the whole process of sleeping is where you're turning that newly learned information into long-term memory. And if you think about just 5th grade where Rebecca and I taught together, if you miss one day of school, you were pretty lost because, we worked through fractions, we worked through proportions so quickly that your brain truly does need to sleep and process that and store it into long-term memory. So here's where it gets fun because we're going to start breaking some ice.
So normally during our presentation, because we have done this one in the past together, I don't know if some of you might have been at the conference last year with us, but this is when we get you guys up and moving, and nobody loves icebreakers more than teachers do. Either with our students or I don't know about you guys, but every year at our staff meetings, we always pull out at least 1 or 2 icebreakers. So we're just going to give you some examples of ones that will help you get your students up and moving in the classroom. If you could go to the next slide for me, please. Awesome. So this is one that I started this year because in Cumberland County and a lot of the other counties, we're all 100% virtual right now. And in all honesty, it's really hard to get these kids motivated, up and moving, getting that physical activity, that movement while we're sitting in front of a computer. I know the students have to be struggling sitting in front of that computer all day because I know I am. So one of the ones that I've tried to incorporate this year is letting the students actually create an emoji with their body or with their face. And I've done this a couple different ways. We've said, I have fifth graders. That's almost all my experience. I had 1 year of fourth grade. So, sometimes they think they're too cool for school. So when you throw in things with technology like emojis, because we know, everybody has phones these days, even sometimes first and second graders. So using emojis makes it relatable to them and makes them more willing to be a little silly. So one of the ways I do that is each student would represent their favorite emoji in the camera. Or if you're doing like an emotional check-in, a social emotional check-in, you could have them represent an emoji of how they're feeling at that time. And it's a quick visual representation for the kids and for you to realize, maybe they're having a rough morning, or they're sleepy, or whatever the case may be. And once they do it once or twice, the kids get a lot more comfortable with it and get even more silly, and movement even more goes in there. And then, of course, I give each student a turn. And the more times I've done it, sometimes I'll just pick a handful of kids to share, and they'll take turns explaining why they chose that emoji. Miss Kellerman, Jess, you did this one.
Yes, this was actually stolen from last week, from an NCAP presentation, and it was super cute, but I'm sure so many of you guys could change it up. And so instead of on a scale of squirrel, you can make it a scale of something else. But it's another virtual option, and it will help you fill your room as soon as you start that virtual teaching. So you'll know if you've got a bunch of, super excited number 8s. You could even incorporate some physical activity here by having them model, what 8 looks like if that's what they're feeling.
Yeah, and
but traditionally, go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just going to say there's 100 ways we can incorporate that, depending on your students, whether you have older students or not. I mean, you can use any type of current social media trend or movie or TV show that the kids are into. It's really easy to create one of those just in a Google Doc or a Google slide with different memes or pictures.
Exactly. And you could do that every day, because that's the whole point of these, get to know you on a scale up. Every day is a new day, and you want to be able to feel your kids out as soon as they walk in that door. So whether it's virtual and you're going based on this, because even if you have a lesson planned, you might need to adapt on the fly and realize, okay, everybody's super tired for whatever reason. This is what I need to do to get everybody warmed up before I start, because I still need to master the content and teach that. So the next slide is one that's not necessarily tailored for virtual. This is what we had teachers actually do in the room. And since COVID will eventually, we will suppress it, you'll be back to being able to do this eventually in the future. So this is hi, hello. And in the classroom, it looks like a fist bump. And then after you've met 2 people, you put your hand up so you can high five another person and partner up with them. And so at that point, you guys can have your class exchange names, do a formal greeting, because so many of our kids lack that. They need to be able to make eye contact, say their name, and learn a peer's name. Because it's the sad truth that we have some kids who do not know the names of all of their friends in class. You can do however many you'd like. You can choose to set a timer. We've embedded one in there so that you can set it for, say, 3 minutes and have them meet multiple students. But lots of benefits. So you're up and moving. That gives them a chance to be loud and rowdy instead of 90 minutes straight being quiet in the classroom. You're modeling the greetings and appropriate eye contact that are so pivotal to being successful in the world. And it gives them a chance to feel special because I can't tell you how many times in the car line I would open the door in the morning to let kids out. And the music was maybe blaring. Their parent didn't say anything to them as far as, bye, have a great day. Like some of our kids, we don't know what they've had to go through even before they set foot in our door at 7:30 in the morning. So this is a way to truly feel special and be called out by name.
This is another social emotional icebreaker. It's the one word mood. So everyone would use one word to describe their current mood. And the rule is that no word can be repeated, but a synonym is okay because, of course, we want to teach them those good skills like using a thesaurus and things.
Could be used in virtual or face-to-face. So you figure if you're face-to-face and you have some kiddos who maybe are shy and they don't want to say how they feel, then you can have them write that on a Post-it note and they can post it up in the board or use one of these virtual options such as Word Cloud. We put one up so you can see what it'll look like. So they're anonymously typing in how they feel, which still gives you an overall picture of the mood of your classroom.
Yeah, it's really just another option, like our squirrel scale and our emojis. So just another option for you guys.
All right, so now we're going to get up and get moving. We're trusting that you're doing all this behind that screen. All right, so this is where you're standing up and we're going to walk you through some knee taps. So if you look at the picture, you'll see the steps written on the left and then a picture model for you. You're going to start with both hands up in the air, and you're going to take your right hand to tap your left knee, and then switch it so your left hand is tapping your right knee. It may be a little confusing at first. I know I had to think about it to orient myself. But the more you practice this, the more you're seeing that you're crossing the midline. So that language side of your brain is communicating with the other part of your brain so that the two can cross and interact together, which is going to give you more powerful learning because you've activated all sides of your brain.
And we know you're all practicing right now behind those cameras that are off.
Just tell me when you want me to move forward. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So this is big circles, another one that we're going to trust you doing behind the screen. You would move your right arm forward in big circles, and then you can do the opposite direction with your arm. This again is crossing the midline. So something super simple. I know when I was younger, we used to do this in elementary school, but when I started teaching, I didn't see a lot of people doing that. So things that can be done at your desk or as you're transitioning from, you know, class to class.
Next slide.
Sorry, I'm doing the activities and I'm thinking that's great for a child in a wheelchair also.
So this one is one of Jessica's and I's favorite. And last year we got a lot of good ideas from the group we had. So this is rock, paper, scissors. I love math. So it's literally in essence, rock, paper, scissors. But instead what they do is they hold up either numbers. There's a lot of different options you can do. So you would do rock, paper, scissors, and then you would hold out your hand with a certain number on it. So for your little babies, it could be, you know, which number is larger. If it's your second, third grade, it could be you multiply those two numbers together. So if I held out 5 fingers and Jessica held out 3, we would have to do 5 times 3. You could also do it with fractions and make a fraction out of your hands. There's a lot of different things you can do. You could subitize with it and make them have to just know that number for the really little babies. And we heard a lot of different ideas with that last year. I know one participant last year talked about proportions and ratios, which is a middle school skill. You could use it with decimals. There's a lot of ways that you can incorporate this activity and make it math related, or even vocab related. Like, you could be very creative with this, but again, it just makes it sound fun. These kids, you know, they're so much more willing, I have found, to do the math and to do the work when it sounds like a game. You know, you could say it's a game and it's literally them just doing some fluency problems, but if they have that idea that it's a game in their head, they're so much more willing to participate.
Yeah, this definitely is my favorite, my all-time favorite. And we've had so many teachers that if they remembered nothing else, this is what they ran with. Like Rebecca says, you can be doing as a teacher so much informal assessment from this. So I can see in a group, what's the strategy that this group of 4 kids is taking when they're in kindergarten? Did they start with the person who had a fist of 5 and then, you know, went down and added the 3 more and then finally added 1? Are they knowing that it's easier to start, you know, with a larger number and counting up? Subitizing. So we had teachers at one training who had never heard of the word, but being able to instantly recognize 3 as 3 when you're holding up 3 fingers. I really love the fractions because there could be Rebecca and I playing and we can use both of our hands for rock, paper, scissors. So I might show 1/5 by using my left hand on top, right hand on the bottom. And then we can compare that to maybe Rebecca showing 3/4. You can do that with improper fractions. There's just so many options here, and you can extend it to having a recorder in your group. Just lots of different options for you to informally assess and still also hold students accountable by incorporating some sort of written product as well.
And this is a great activity to use when, like they always say, to try and use your classroom time as much as you can, especially now in the virtual setting. I know my day has been cut a whole bunch. So just in general, if you're passing out papers or you have to take attendance, you can have these kids playing that to kind of fill that empty space. So it might be somewhat simple multiplication or adding or subtracting, but it's just filling that blank space with learning still. Okay, next slide.
So we'll go to the next slide, but don't be surprised if you see your kids playing it on the playground because they seem to like it as much as we do.
Yes.
So this is called homophone fitness. And so that's when, say, words that are sounding similar, but they're spelled and mean 2 different things. So you're going to see in the drive that we have attached to PDFs. These were not made by us. There's credit to who we've listed who actually made those, but multiple pages of PDFs that you can print. And you'll see, can we go to the next slide to show them up close? So here's a sample page. The cowboy blanked his horse into town. So did he rode or rode? And you look for the correct spelling and do the matching activity. So some of these activities you may not have the room or the time to implement in your own classroom, but you can always partner with your physical education teacher and share these with them. Something that's more appropriate in the gym. You can also edit and make your own sort of physical activities tied to these.
And it doesn't have to just be homophone fitness. It can be, you know, math word problems. It could be science terminology. I mean, you could literally use this for any subject. And just, you might not have the picture to go with it, but you could have, you know, 5 jumping jacks for this choice or 2 sit-ups for this choice. It's just that idea of getting, again, that fitness, that physical activity in, and not making it just answering questions.
All right, so here's another one. At first glance, you might think, oh, only my little kids can do this, but we're going to show you some pretty impressive things that we've even had chemistry tweak this up some. So we tried to keep the instructions pretty simple. You're going to get a ball, or in this case, it was a frog, a starting mark, which was the pad, and then 2 baskets. So you'll place the baskets apart on opposite sides of the room. And just like you see in the middle photo, your students will take turns tossing the ball or the frog to get it in the basket. So then once you've collected all of the Lego pieces, they would work as a team to assemble them. So in this example, there were contractions. So you will, that'll spell you'll. In the next slide, we show other examples. Subitizing, so matching the numeral to the amount of dots. We've seen some chemistry teachers who took like NaCl and combined it to make salt.
Absolutely, or multiplication. So this is actually my students. So a lot of us have probably heard of using the beach ball activity. So in the ELA setting, you might have a bunch of different questions on the ball and you pass it around the room, and wherever they're, I would go very specific and do like my right pointer finger, but it could be just your hand. It just depends on how big the ball is and how many questions or problems you have on it. So wherever they catch it, for ELA, it might tell them to describe the setting. What does the cover tell you? Just different questions relating to a story they read, just to help that comprehension and those different story elements. In math, what I did, and you can see that's one of my old students, we had a beach day in my classroom when we were prepping for the EOG. And so I had a variety of some fact fluency with fractions, so some multiplication of fractions and division, and then word problems. And wherever they caught it with their right pointer finger, I believe I did, was the question that they had to answer. It was in a group setting, so to make everyone accountable, while that student was solving, everyone else on their whiteboard would write down what they thought the answer was, and then we would all talk about it and figure out how we got to that answer. And then in science, the same idea. It could be vocabulary terms and they have to describe what they are. It could just be some EOG SchoolNet type questions for review, similar to ELA. And what I normally do for each beach ball I have, there's a general theme. ELA is a little easier to make it more generic, maybe do a fiction and a nonfiction version. In math, I'm a little more specific, as well as science. I'll keep it with one general standard, and that ball will go with that standard. And you can get them at the dollar store for $1, and then I write on them with Sharpie, and I have them. I just deflate them, and I still have them to this day, one for each subject. And the kids love it because they feel like they're doing indoor recess, hot potato or whatever game they're used to playing, they now can do in the classroom. And, who doesn't like throwing things around the classroom and not getting in trouble? Next slide, please.
It's also a great thing to share with your parents. So if you have students who haven't had the opportunity to come in the classroom, I know in Cumberland, Rebecca's not even having students at all because they're all virtual. And more, we actually have our babies 5 days a week right now. But these are things you can be suggesting to parents as well so that they can encourage some of that movement, because I'm sure those parents feel it's a struggle to have their kiddo in front of a screen all day. So Times Are Rolling is also, all those cute little cards that you see are already colored and up for you to print, and the lucky winner is going to get their own laminated set. This is called Times Are Rolling, and it's a lot of different activities that you can do related to telling time. So you would take an established amount of color-coded solo cups, and under them you would randomly put these different times. So whether digital time or if it's in word form for half an hour, quarter after. Your teams would bowl and collect the cards that they knock over. So if I'm on the red team, I'm aiming to just bowl the red cards and collect those cards. Then you're going to arrange the cards, and you can choose to use that play memory, to matching quarter hour to 15 minutes written in that numeral form, standard form. Find the total amount of time. You could have your students work it into a word problem. So lots of different activities. You can also incorporate manipulatives or virtual clocks so that students can practice, using that manipulative related to telling time. So this is our agility ladder. If you look closely, those are actually paint sticks. So if you call Home Depot or Lowe's, make their hearts bleed, tell them how you're a teacher, and they're more than willing to give you those paint sticks. And on the edges, we've sewn them together with some tape. And so when you unravel it, it becomes an agility ladder. And in between the steps, we have different words. So you could use sight words, you could use vocabulary related to your unit. So if you were in division, you could use divisor and quotient and all of those different words. Students are going to take turns walking or crawling to say and spell the word. If they don't know it, they could step off and go to the end of the line. But even then, if you arrange your students in an efficient manner along the sides, they'll have the opportunity to hear and repeat on the next time. So multiple opportunities to learn, not just when it's their turn in line. You could use it for foreign language, again, vocabulary that's key to your unit. And if you don't have time or space to make the agility ladder, consider using dry erase on the different tiles in your hallways. It wipes up pretty quickly. But again, when you're incorporating that movement, so that kid is actually, bouncing to that third block, you're activating the brain and having it cross the midline so that they're more likely to remember that and be engaged in learning. They're next to their peers. So instead of sitting silently in their seats, they're conversing about, hey, what's that word again? What does it mean? So lots of different reasons why you truly want to work in that physical activity. And I'm sure some of you guys see super young, it's different for a kid to look at the numeral 7 and know that 7 is 7. Sometimes they have to actually hop on a number line and see 7 was way far away compared to 2. All right, next slide.
This one's all you, Jess. This one always trips me up.
So this is the Stroop effect, and there's really no purpose to it other than to get your kiddos focused, but you could work in maybe some mathematical elements by timing them when they read the cards. We're going to actually show it to you guys on the next slide in a big form to test you on it. But essentially, on one time that you see it, you'll actually read the word for the word itself. So red would be, RED, you're using it for the spelling. The second time, you're going to actually disguise yourself from reading the word and actually say the color that the word is spelled in. So let's give it a try. All right, so Rebecca, you got your phone handy so you can time us?
Absolutely. Hold on one second. All right.
All right, so you guys behind your screens, this time you're just going to read the word. So the first one is blue, green, yellow. So when we say start, you want to read all 4 lines, go from left to right, just by reading the word. On your mark, get set, go. All right.
So that time it probably took people 6 seconds or less just reading it based on the spelling. Now comes the tricky part. Now what you need to do is you need to read what color you see. So you need to say what color you see, not say it based on the spelling. So for instance, the first one would be red. All right. Everyone try it out. You can say it out loud or say it silently to yourselves. I'm going to do it silently so I don't embarrass myself. All right. Ready, set, go.
Oh, it trips me up. Red, blue, green, purple.
Okay, I did it. I messed up only twice, but that took me almost 14 seconds. So it's definitely a lot more intense, and it takes longer. It gets you focused because you really have to hone in. So again, this is just a good like brain break almost. You can use with your students, especially in this virtual setting.
Yeah, and so these cards are there for you. You can print them out, have students keep it in their desk or virtually at home, and then just, randomly throughout the semester, have them pull it out. Maybe you can have a running total of your times and see if they beat it. But it is a good chance to kind of refocus. Maybe you've come inside or there was some big, activity that made the classroom kind of tense. Just have everybody channel their focus into this activity. Next slide. So this is called Dice Bonk. We're going to reference someone who actually is the original owner of all of these activities, and his explanation is much more detailed and understanding than my 3 steps to the left. But you are essentially going to get in touch with your PE teacher and gather these activities, since they probably have these large size cones and larger dice, or there's plenty of different grant opportunities where you can snag these for yourself, such as through Donors Choose. We'll talk about that later. But you're essentially going to toss that die. Our students will move a clothespin or clip according to the number that they land on. And you can adapt this for older students by having them subtract to travel back down the grid. But let's say they rolled a 3, they're going to start at 3, and then the next student could roll and they would add on from that. And this is actually what the grid looks like. You could, ideally adjust it. Maybe you can work in some sort of place value. There are some die that you can buy at Dollar Tree that actually a dry erase. So you could, instead of using the standard 1 through 6, you could probably change that up somehow.
Or add decimals or make it a fraction. All this stuff is definitely interchangeable. And you can definitely modify it for the grade level that you do teach.
Add a rep is played pretty similar, but you don't necessarily have the visual cues that you do on the previous activity. So you'll take a paddle, or these boards will actually kind of look like paddles, but you could actually use it as a flat surface to hold your paper as well. But in this case, your students are going to record the number, and then there's a good number of slots so that they can then take that back with them to combine those to come up with a complete sum. Again, you can be doing informal assessments as far as how are students adding those 10 numbers? Are they trying to find doubles and then, add based on that? Or are they just going from left to right? So lots of different informal assessing that you can do while students think that they're playing.
This one is a fun one, and we normally do this one with you guys. But what you do is you essentially, and this again can be modified for any subject, you're going to take a cookie sheet and then that picture board, and then you have magnetic letters that are laid out all around the classroom, and then you have just a regular old balloon that's been blown up. So what you essentially have to do, or the student has to do, is they take the balloon and they have to continuously keep it up in the air, like think of like keep it up when you were younger, and they just keep bouncing the balloon in one arm, and then they have to go travel to pick up letters around the classroom, and they could do one at a time, and they can't drop the balloon. If they drop the balloon, they have to go back, and they pick up a magnetic letter. So let's say I picked up an L for, so what I want to do is match the L to the picture of the light bulb, because they both start with the L sound. And you could do what the word ends with, you could do what the word begins with, and I know you can buy magnetic numbers, so you could also do, create a number with it, or find the answer to a multiplication problem or a division problem. And the whole point is that they're magnetic, so they stick to the cookie sheet where they're supposed to be. Again, you can buy all these supplies at the dollar store. And I love the dollar store. That's where we get a majority of the supplies for these activities that you've seen. And yeah, it's pretty simple like that. It's almost like a relay race. So then once you do the balloon and you pick up a letter and put it somewhere, you pass the balloon to the next person and they do the same thing until you fill out your entire picture board on your cookie sheet.
So I just wanted to add that on this activity especially, this is another way that you can not only incorporate physical activity, but to truly get your students to be comfortable no matter what degree they are on the spectrum of mastery of a skill. So if I maybe don't know all of my letters and sounds, but I definitely know that banana starts with B, then instead of just arbitrarily saying that I have to do this whole activity, I'm able to say, okay, that's one that I know. So I'm going to choose that one. And while I bounce my balloon, I'm going to be looking for the magnetic B because I know that one. And again, you've got students who are working with each other, so they're going to naturally have more conversation. So they may say, hey, well, Bob, my name's Bob, and I also start with the letter B. So you're going to get a lot more kind of authentic learning out of this activity as opposed to a worksheet.
Okay, next slide. So these are just a bunch of links to different virtual manipulatives. I know not everyone is one-to-one, but we're definitely slowly getting there. So with your the iPads, whatever, these are just more tools you can have because I know that, you know, some schools are definitely more scarce on their manipulatives. So these are just some virtual options. That's the one nice thing through all this craziness this past year. There's definitely been more and more manipulatives online that have been available to us as teachers and to our students, which has been awesome, and great extra resources that, you know, we don't have to necessarily pay for. So that's just a little slide for you guys to use if need be. All right, you can go to the next one. And those are just more pictures of more manipulatives. Jess, is that from a specific website?
Yeah, so this is actually from the Number World. So even if you're not using the program, I just took a screenshot of just a portion of the many that they offer. So again, say the attribute blocks that you know you already typically use in your classroom, you can get the virtual manipulative for your students who are learning virtually, or just to share with parents so they can reinforce at home when you don't have enough supplies to send home. So really great resources. All of them are free. They don't require any sort of login. And many, like the ones that you see on the next two slides, you're able to download and actually embed them into your PowerPoint. So you wouldn't have to just go to a website. You can have it embedded into your activity.
You can skip. Those are just more examples. Yep.
Yeah, and then this one side too, you'll see a lot of options, but then if you click fractions on the top left, you'll be able to isolate just the fraction manipulatives. And across the top right, you'll see that instead of just having a manipulative, your students can practice games or puzzles or different things with those actual manipulatives. So definitely check them out. If maybe your county has promoted just one, this is a good place to go and explore.
So this is similar to the rock, paper, scissors. This one's focusing on fractions, but again, you can 100% manipulate it and make it what you need. So what happens is you're on opposite sides of the floor and there's a bunch of dominoes that you can't see. And what happens is each person, one from each team, comes up and picks a domino, and then they're going to compare and the larger fraction wins. So if you have, you know, 3 and 3, that's 3/3, that's a whole, and they had 1/4, then they'd have to know that the one whole is bigger. It's kind of similar to war, which you can also use cards for this same idea and play war with fractions. And again, it does not have to be fractions. You can use it as a multiplication problem, an addition or subtraction problem. You can also do it, arrange the fractions, so pick up multiple, maybe pick up 3, and then you have to arrange them from least to greatest, et cetera, et cetera. Just another resource, another tool that a lot of us have in our classrooms laying around that you can use to make a game out of it. Because again, if we tell them it's a game, they're much more willing to participate and get some more authentic learning and a little less resistance from your students. You can go to the next slide. So I tried to incorporate some more movement with us being virtual. So of course, I'm sure a lot of us have already done the scavenger hunts at home. I know that was like the hot thing on all of my PLNs on Facebook and things. But you can make them a little bit more meaningful. It doesn't have to just be go get your favorite toy and show me. So what I did was I actually had them, go find an item with a fraction on it when we were introducing fractions this year. And so I got some kids that got a measuring cup, others got me a label of some sort or a couple different ideas. You could also do something with vocabulary or with the letter sounds, like find me something that starts with the letter Y. Or when you're talking about measurement, find something that would be measured in inches or centimeters or a foot. But just what I've learned from doing them a few times, some different hints, some helpful hints that I have found to be helpful, is make sure you have a list of the items you want the students to search for ready ahead of time. The first time I did it, I 100% was just like, go find this. And they would run and go get it. While that works, a little bit pre-planning always helps and makes it a little more time efficient. I also would use a timer and set the students up for success. So we would talk about my expectations ahead of time. We worked as a group to determine how long we think we needed for a time. Because 5 minutes is clearly too long and 10 seconds is too short for them to leave. So we would come up with a reasonable time as a group, and then that's what I would set my timer for. And the students, again, they knew what they were looking for. They knew things that were, off limits. And then I would only allow a certain number of students to share each round, because when it is something fun, they all want to share, they all want to get their input in there. So I would pick, 3 kids, and then I'd make sure I picked a different 3 kids the next time. So that way we were able to get through a couple rounds without wasting too much time. And again, that gets them up and moving. It gets it personable, and they have fun and enjoy being able to show things in their house. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen more cats and dogs and baby sisters and brothers through this school year than I ever have in any previous school year, because they just are so excited to show us a little bit of their own lives. All right, you can go to the next slide. This is all you, Kellerman.
So these next few slides, I don't think I added them yet to the drive, but I'll be sure to do that. These are just some rainy day, mostly fine motor activity. You could just decide at the beginning of the year to set them up around your room so that if a kiddo is just stressing out, maybe they had a rough morning, but you don't have the time to debrief with them yet, or you somehow just work it out. Some of your kiddos might have IEPs that truly do require for a brain break, and they just need 2 minutes to kind of regroup by themselves before they naturally go back and get in the groove. These are things that you can put around your room discreetly, model it at the beginning of the year so students know how to use it appropriately, and just have it there as a resource for your students. So this one is called Fine Motor Alligator Scarf. It's really just requiring you to have a bag with a scarf in it. So you can have your students use one hand to manipulate their fingers to kind of get that scarf hidden in their hand with their fists closed. And then they can try it with the opposite hand. I found that for me, my non-dominant hand, it took considerably longer. You could incorporate academics if you wanted. So we had tried this once with a group and had students record their time and they rank themselves. You can work it into science where you generate a hypothesis. So maybe stop after the first 5 students and talk about how do we see a trend line, you know, graphically, what direction do we think this will go? Is there sort of commonalities between girls versus boys? So you can definitely upscale this to make it active, different size scarves, and then record based on that. But it's also perfectly okay to just leave this at a desk in the corner of the room for a kiddo to just try to get his mind off of things for a minute. Move the Cargo is also building some fine motor skills. So you're using single blocks in each hand and collect a set number or as many as you can. So instead of just doing one at a time, you want students to manipulate and pick up and continue to maintain hold over the ones that they've picked up to date. Next slide. You know, again, things that you can get at dollar stores. So a basket, and you weave in a theme, maybe around Halloween. This might be appropriate for some of your itty bitty babies, so that they can use a tweezer or something so that they can pick the spiders out without touching the web, or you clothespin to move tiny manipulatives such as those pipe cleaner pieces. So, you know, work it into sorting and categorizing if you want, or just leave it there so that they can channel some unnecessary energy. This isn't necessarily fine motor. You're building in a little bit more gross to an extent, but let's say you've got some sight words, you've given them this grid on a poster board, and students are able to physically, you know, spell out green, Green. So they're having to symbol search for those different letters and then spell that word. And encourage them to use multiple modalities. So saying it out loud as they spell it, using it in a sentence. Noodle build is really just for fun. You can cut up some summer pool noodles. If you look super closely in that video, in that picture, you'll see on the chair is an arrangement. So there's like an orange, a red, an orange, there's a little tower. So we had that hidden behind a board. We lifted it momentarily so that a small group of people could kind of strategize and see if they could remember the sequence. And then they went back to try to build it. Chalk is another great tool, super cute.
Sorry. I thought I was muted. So I love using chalk, especially when it's nice out, especially when we go back to school. You know, these kids are going to want the fresh air and be able to go out and about and move. So I use chalk for a variety of things. That's actually an example of some of my students when we were practicing in, I believe it was EOG small groups, like intervention type groups. And we were practicing, I believe that's subtracting mixed numbers. So again, it's simple fluency practice, but the kids got to go outside, they got to work with a friend, and they got to use chalk. So sometimes the simplest thing, like using a whiteboard or writing on our desks with whiteboard markers instead of using our notebooks or a pencil and paper, gets them so much more motivated and exciting. So the next couple slides are just different ideas you can use with chalk. So again, it's just taking what you're already doing in your classroom and putting it outside with a different type of medium. So you can go to the next one. So this one, again, replicate the pattern with this ball, kind of like Foursquare, and you can use different shapes, numbers, same idea, just a different example of using chalk. hopscotch, but a little bit with a little twist on it. It's like, how many times can you hop through this and make the number 10 or 20? And you can use just a regular 1 through 10 hopscotch. You can change the numbers and make them all different and make them go through the hopscotch, but by creating a sum of numbers or multiplying. Essentially, you let them do any operation that they want, but you have to get them, they all have to get to the same answer, regardless of if they add or subtract. So they would go through, and let's say I want them to get to 25. They might go 2 times 5, and then go back to 2 and say they times it by 2 again to get 20, and then jump all the way to 5 and say they added 5. So they got to 25 doing it their own way. So it works on order of operations, just that quick mental math that they were able to do it in their head because they have to think on the fly. And yeah, that's about it. So go to the next one for me, please. This is just another example for science. They drew a picture of a plant in this example, and they have to label the different parts of the plant. You can provide a word bank. You don't have to. It's really up to you. You could also do this with the water cycle. They have to draw all the parts of the water cycle, which is a 5th grade standard. The different parts of a cell. You could also do, I'm trying to think of other things we do, the different types of clouds in 5th grade, or different ecosystems. Maybe they have to draw different plants and animals that are represented in that ecosystem you give them, etc. Just a different idea for really just reviewing. Okay, next one, please.
If you draw a large scale, then your students can actually hop on the stem and hop on the leaf while they're saying those words or parts of a cell, just as they would hop on this one. So if you're hopping on a letter and you're saying the sound, then you might hop on the corresponding picture. So the F, then the person would hop over to the flower, the B, and hop over to the butterfly. So incorporate the movement, not just the drawing. Next slide. This is a personal favorite as well, just because it's fun, whether it's a get to know you or a good review. So you're practicing language vocabulary. So in this case, this might be a Spanish class. Polo is chicken. So the student would imitate using actions or sounds a chicken while saying polo so that you can remember that. And challenge your students, like try to get them to say, starting with the first person, what was everyone's word and action? Because that movement might help you embed that new vocabulary term.
This is just another example of hopscotch, but with words instead of numbers. You know, so they might have to step on a certain word and either give examples of that word if it's a science word like producer, or a consumer, and give some examples, or it could be giving the definition through that hopscotch. This is one of my personal favorites. I love doing escape rooms. Now you can buy them, which includes all of the fun, fancy stuff, or you can be like me, who doesn't have all those extra funds, and I create them myself. What I have found in the past is when I've bought them off of Teachers Pay Teachers or any of those different websites where other people have made it, a lot of the time there's issues with the access you have, because if someone else has made it and they don't do all the correct sharing techniques for it, a lot of the times the students can only do certain parts and then it gets locked out, or other things. So I've created my own. I like to use Google Sites or Google Forms. And I mean, I've been doing this a lot now, so it's a lot easier for me, but a great way to start is just doing a simple Google form. There's also tons and tons of different ways you can incorporate the breakout aspect of it through using, you know, I've done secret messages in a different font, and they have to figure out what it says, to answer the questions. There's also a thing where you can create your own puzzle with your own picture. So the kids will have to virtually put the puzzle together and then answer the question that's on the puzzle. I have done an actual completely different presentation on how to create those escape rooms. So feel free to reach out if you are interested. With it being virtual right now for us, this is a great way for the kids to still have that fun classroom feel while stuck at home. And then that bottom picture is an Easter egg hunt that we did one year. My students, I had a great parent volunteer that year, and I know sometimes those are hard to come by, who put Easter eggs that had little math problems, task cards all over my classroom for me while we were at lunch. And when they came back, the kids all went in groups and they all had baggies and they were able to collect as many Easter eggs as they could find. And then then they would answer the questions from those Easter eggs in order to earn that candy that they all really wanted from those Easter eggs. So it was very motivating. They got to move around the classroom, work with friends, and they had a ton of fun with that. And of course, it was my way of getting the fun holidays in there while still being educational. You can go to the next slide. This is another activity. This is an activity that Jessica and I actually did together while we co-taught 5th grade. So this is, they were practicing their decimals. And so instead of just ordering, rounding, and comparing decimals or watching a video and doing it, they actually used a timer that went to the 1,000th of a second. And they took turns time each other in actual Olympic trials. And we came up with, as a class, what trials they would do. So the one that you see here is they had to see how long they could have that hula hoop go around their arm. So their partners would time them, and then they would do it. And it was a group of 4. Once they all got their times, they were able to sit down as a group and decide who got first place, who got the gold, who got silver, who got bronze. So not only did they have to order the decimals and then we rounded and then compared them again, but they also had to remember, because I know with my students, they always get confused on who won, because they always want to go with the greatest number, right? But it's actually the fastest or the smallest number who wins. So that was a real world example of them really remembering that and pushing that forward in their brains, because, one kid's going to go, hey, no, I was the quickest, I should be first. And then they'll realize, oh, I had the smallest time. Therefore, I should be the first one in that order. So they had a ton of fun with this one. And here are just some more pictures of the timer I used. This one was a balancing one. I'm also big on room transformations. This gets the kids up and moving. One year I was very, very eager. So every week I would redecorate my classroom. They're not like the ones you see on Pinterest, because I just don't have that kind of time. But the kids didn't care. They would be so excited. Every Monday morning they'd come in and try and figure out, what our classroom was going to be that day. So this was at the end of the year to help with EOG review, because, all those kids dread that EOG every year. And this was just a way to get them involved and having fun. So we had a carnival. The one in the middle, they're sitting on the floor in, again, dollar store, pool floats. And I had no desks in my room that week because we were at the beach. So I told all the kids to bring a towel to sit on for class, and that's all I told them. They loved that week. That was probably our favorite week as a class. They got to build fake sandcastles and solve task cards with it. We did a 5-star restaurant in LA one week, so all the lights were off, and I had the fake battery-operated candles with tablecloths and menus, and we actually cooked. And we talked about fractions and how we can manipulate our recipes by doubling them, and actually went and made Rice Krispie treats. And then we were construction workers, finding area and perimeter with buildings that were around our classroom. So they had a ton of fun with that. super motivating. And then you can go to the next one. We did the Mathematician Super Bowl, and this one was from last year. The baskets is a similar activity to that Lego toss, but what happened was the kids had to score a touchdown. So they threw the football into the laundry baskets, and then once they got enough points, they were able to solve all of the task cards that were in the touchdown buckets. They also used the actual statistics from the football teams to order decimals again, making it real world, especially for those boys that are like, oh, I don't like math. But they loved football and sports, so they were really motivated to do that. We also had a concession stand, which is what you see on the bottom. So with my tutor, they would all get a $20 bill. Obviously, it was a fake one. And there was a menu, and they got to choose as much food as they wanted, but they couldn't go over their budget. Fifth grade doesn't do tax, so there was no tax involved. But they'd have to tell me their total cost, and then they'd have to tell me how much change they got back after their concession stand. So this one was a lot of fun. My principal even came in and played football with the kids, and they loved it. Go to the next slide. This is another one I did. We went to our auditorium, and we were going on an adventure, and I told them that we were going to the airport the day before, and these kids were panicking. One told me he didn't pack extra underwear. One told me that his mom would get so mad at me because I was taking him out of the school. And then when we got here, they had a lot of fun. So in each different international airport, there was a suitcase, and in the suitcase there was task cards, and then they had to go to the food court, and they got to choose if they wanted McDonald's or Chick-fil-A. And again, these are all just ways I literally just take task cards, but I get them moving and talking with each other and get them out of the monotonous, desk and chair in the classroom. Another way for EOG review is I do 4 corners. So I'll take just a simple practice test and post a question on my my smartboard or my ClearTouch, and I will say, A is this corner, B, C, and D, and then I say on your mark, get set, go. So what they'll do is they'll go to the corner they believe the answer is. They will talk with those people that are in the corner and come up with one good reasoning why they chose that answer. And then they'll pick one person from each group to share out. And then once we talk about it as a group, I say, okay, one more try. And I give the same corners, and we see if any kids have changed their mind. Now, what I've been doing lately with virtual teaching is I use the 4 corners of the screen. So I'll give a question, and then I will tell them, and I'll represent it because I know that with the mirroring on the webcam, it can be kind of funky. But I'll say point here for A, B, C, and D, and then we all point in the room. Another way you could do that is have them actually get up and run so that it looks in the screen like they're in a specific corner with their cameras on to get them up and moving while virtually. But again, this is just another way instead of just putting in the chat if they think it's A, B, C, or D. Just adding some kind of movement and not so monotonous, just typing and staring at a computer screen. So I did do this example last year. This is an actual test question from my students. It is 5th grade, and everyone's always so shocked that this is a 5th grade question. So it says, Mark looks at the clouds in the sky and decides that he does not need to take his umbrella with him today. Which clouds did Mark most likely see in the sky? And the crazy thing is, this is not even one of the hardest weather 5th grade questions we have in North Carolina. So the answer to that one would be, so because it's saying that we don't need an umbrella, it means there's going to be no rain, and nimbo means rain. And stratus clouds are the dark gray clouds. So it'd actually be a cirrus cloud. They're the wispy ones. That means change is coming. So it's going to be raining in the next few days, but it's not raining that day. So I don't know if any of you knew that one.
So I'm going to skip through maybe the next 4 slides because there's just 2 activities that you can actually read through. Can you take us to the slide with rigor, please? All right, so this is the definition that we found for rigor, but this was something that came up at last year's EC conference. Someone said, you know, hey, don't mistake movement and physical activity for rigor. And that kind of stumped us at the moment, but I entirely echoed the sentiments of that individual. Like, it's not, you don't want to just say, okay, I've improved my teaching by incorporating movement. You do still want to maintain an element of rigor, but I do challenge you to try to start with the movement. And then I think naturally the rigor aspect comes to you, because just like we said in the rock, paper, scissors, I love math show, there are ways that you can scale up a simple activity to add some element of rigor into it. So talk with your colleagues on your grade level, continue to implement, and then you might see how the rigorous elements can be embedded. Next slide. The final stretch of these slides actually has a couple of plugs. So you take the time through, there's embedded links. The first one is for NCAT, and I share that because it's a true gem. So if you've never gone, definitely take advantage of that. It was started by a teacher of the year years and years ago, and there's 2 campuses, and they are actually open during COVID. So you go for almost a week. It's free of charge. Many of your schools are familiar with it, so they're willing to send you and cover your sub for that activity. But it's food and housing and the completely rigorous PD that they offer. And that's where a lot of these activities came from. So they had a very similar physical activity in the classroom course that I'd completed. Next slide. So this calendar, be sure you pop in and just browse that website, see what might speak to you, and then go visit the mountains or the coast. Mike Morris, if you click the link that is embedded for there, you'll see a lot of descriptions for some of the activities that were embedded in this PowerPoint. The next slide, I'm going to zoom in on those tabs that are on his website. So you'll see he has classroom resources, he has handouts from the presentations that he's held across the nation, different assessments that you can work in. So lots of information here. And the next slide actually has 2 screenshots. So these might not necessarily be straight up academic, but again, consider sharing some of these activities with your teacher. Try to encourage that person to work in some of the elements that you're studying in science and math and reading. Next slide. So again, he has much more descriptive things for you to look at. So the dice bomb game that we mentioned earlier with just 3 steps, if you go to his descriptions, you'll be able to see much more detailed descriptions of how to set that up and how you can use it. There's also some links for just math in general. So NC-SIP is the North Carolina School Improvement Project. They work out of NCDPI, and in a nutshell, they pretty much, it's a grant, and they want to help students not only with disabilities, but to truly bridge that gap for all learners to make growth. So you'll see a link to their website, the number knowledge test, and then there are 2 free PDs. So let's go to the next slide. So again, this is the definition of NC-SIP and a Foundations of Math course. It's a 5-day course. They have tried to merge that into a hybrid, so a 3-day face-to-face or 2-day face-to-face, 3-day online. So you'll be hearing more about that later on this year. But this is an actual picture of our teachers in my county doing this. So they truly stress how to move from concrete to representational and only then getting into math in an abstract form. Typically, we don't do that, especially new teachers or people who maybe math is not their first love, you jump into X plus 8 and you totally skip the concrete and the representational to help your students understand the true math. The number knowledge test, we use this as a way to, especially if you're in special ed, maybe your students aren't always showing growth on a EOG. This is a way that you can measure a starting point and then assess at mid-year and end of year. So the number knowledge test, if you click that link on a few slides earlier, you'll be taken directly to the test. It's strictly mental math, and you can use it K-12 to truly understand what students have adapted. So it's mental math. There's no paper and pencil, but you're to hone in on how maybe a fifth grader is struggling because they don't have a good concept and grasp over place value, for example. ESU also has some free online professional development, so be sure to check out that link. It's through the Friday Center, Friday Institute. There's a really fabulous one that they recently set up for teaching math to young learners, and it truly got great video examples from classrooms, from students, literally from pre-K all the way up, so that you can see how to effectively students and meet them on the developmental trajectory that they're at based on their age. Central, this is really great, especially if you have some students in your school who might have adapted PE. So be sure to check out all of the things that are on that red banner. Some of it's pretty funny. So they actually talk about games that we had in childhood, like Duck, Duck, Goose, and how that's definitely on the wall of shame now. Right, and then if you need an app for yourself, you can download this Google Chrome extension, and it's going to pop up while you're sitting at your desk every day so that you can do some different activities. So there's a link to that extension. This is one final plug that we want to make. So DPI offers a number of different activities based on your county overall, like what direction they want to head into. So if this is one area where your EC director might want to improve upon is physical activity, then they can actually sign up for a movement-based instruction. So there's a link to the Learning S'more that talks about those different aligned LEA self-assessment criteria. Only your EC director can make that request though, but be sure to share that with them. All right, so Rebecca has a spin, and she painstakingly put your 91 names in there. So she's going to spin.
Yes, I'm going to spin. And can you, if you are here, can you just send us a chat message so that we know to, I do have all your emails, so we know to email you and we can get your information that way. All right, here I go. There's a lot of names here. Okay, what? Karen Bobolik. I hope I'm saying that right. So Karen, if you're here. No, yes, maybe. I don't see anyone from Karen. All right, we're gonna do it again. This is very slow. Heather Clark. So if Heather Clark is here. All right, I'm just gonna spin till we get some names because we have a few prizes. Mac Summer. Mac Summer. Kirsten Wolf. Kirsten Wolf. And I really apologize if I'm completely destroying your names. Lisa Jones. Kimberly Baylard.
Oh, Lisa's here. Way to go. Lisa is here. She's written it twice. She's so excited that she is the winner of the activities. So we are going to bundle them up to you, Lisa, and they'll come in a nice little white USPS box. I can't guarantee it'll be there in 2 days, since who knows now with the postal service. But make sure you get your information to Rebecca through email.
And then Miss Ray has put the link for the evaluation in the chat. So make sure you click on that so you can get your CEUs and hopefully be kind to us, your presenters.
I just want to thank our excellent presenters. I am very sorry, and I'd like to apologize to them for the bumpy start to the presentation. That was all my fault. I wanted to let them know that this recording will be posted. I will send an email to all the registrants with the link to the session materials that will include the slides. And I will also include, I cannot include the evaluation link because, yeah, I can't do that. So you need to pick it up here from the chat box. If you have difficulty with that, please email me directly and I can email individuals, but I'd rather not email every single person. But I would love if you could give a round of applause to our presenters, because I know they deserve it. And I know the creativity and the ideas that are generating are fantastic. So thank you so much to our presenters for all of their expertise and great ideas to engage all kinds of learners. And we thank you for participating in the virtual conference. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Jessica. You guys are awesome.
They're saying the evaluation link isn't working.
I will have to see why. I'm not sure what to say about that. Hold on just a second.
Sorry,
I'm
guys.
going to stop the recording. Thank you very much.